topic is actually a very touchy topic, especially to children who are growing up.
Yeah.
And it's the 5 subtle ways to introduce sex education
so tough.
to your children. The conversation of the birds and the bees. And I feel like it's never just one conversation you have. It's always the small things you build over time, and it just transitions. Because for a 4-year-old, you just can't tell them where children come from, and you start explaining the semen and the sperms and the ovaries and the ovum. Obviously, they won't understand what you're talking about. So now for a 4-year-old, you give them 4-year-old knowledge, and then they transition, they've gotten into schools, they've learned about things. You just slowly transition into the conversation. But I have a question for you.
Yes.
How did you ever have the birds and the bees talk? And
With
how
my
was it?
parents?
Yeah.
Yo.
Or did you learn from the internet and from your friends?
I think even now I still don't know what the birds and the bees talk is, because my goodness, I think for me it was a combination of many things, because I grew up in a very Christian household. So of course the first thing my mother ever told me is, go out. You do not ukiguza hivi mwanaume shiva mitindas mimba. And then I'd also grown up in do you know Zimmerman, the estate? If you know Zima Bede and you've lived there in the early 2000s, then you know for sure what you know what the situation was. Every 2 days, your neighbor girl is pregnant. I go class 5, she's pregnant. How? Every couple of other, your form 4 liver metoka shule, amefukuzwa shule because she got pregnant. So all of these traumatic stories, all these very traumatizing stories, they just led me to, I think, self preservation, and that was just like, no, I'ma just keep it together, babes. Keep it together, keep it together.
Keep your legs closed.
At least if you're married and you get pregnant, it's your husband's child. What are they gonna do? So I think that was the mentality that I grew up with. But like, no, my parents never brought up the birds and the bees ever.
I feel like for most African household, it was always a cautionary tale. It was never explaining what sex is and how to practice safe sex. It was always nikiwahi kupata na kijana, hiyo siku utachukua virago vyako vote uende. It was always cautionary tale. It was always a threat, never educational. But now the thing we're actually trying to tell you, for you to have this talks with your children as they're growing up, the first thing you need is to create a safe space for them to even come and ask you questions, you know. I think like every time a child is curious about something, instead of explaining to them what's going on, maybe these children will know these things, you know. I could create the most safe environment in my house for my child. They never watch things on TV. They're never exposed to all of these things. But they go to school. Kuna mwingine watching, you know, their friends are talking about these things. So your child very innocently comes and asks you, Mom, what is this? What is sex? And instead of you just saying, oh, where did you hear that from? This is what it is. This is what happens. Don't do it right now. You're not ready. You know, instead of having this conversation with your child, unasema, mambo ya shetani ulitoa wapi? It now becomes an aggressive thing. So now anytime a child hears something, they will never come to you, because it's no longer a safe space for them to express themselves and to ask these questions. So who do they turn to? Their friends.
Their friends, the internet. The neighbors.
You put whatever he was looking for in a search engine, in a camera, images and videos. So they think it's just this crude, no one is really there to explain it to them.
Yeah, it feels weird. And no, for sure, children just know people are on top of each other somehow.
Yes.
So every child has that image, but the process of it all then has to be broken down in a way that makes sense. But it is also very important for you to maybe break it down age appropriately. How so? Reading. I remember, but then I read that point and I remember that I've been traumatized. I have traumatized myself as well. So I remember, I think I was in class 4 or something. As I've mentioned to you multiple times, my mom was a teacher in the school that I was in. But yeah, she was like a teacher in the upper primary, and I was obviously a young kid. So I think this is class 3, class 4. I think either class 3 or class 4. I think I went home for lunch in the afternoon, and then I saw this book, right? And I can't even remember the title of the book. All I know is I had a lot of it was breaking down sex and sexual intercourse, and you could see parts, and then there were positions and stuff like that. So I'm a class 4 child. Moshene, kimenyi. Because we're all kind of curious. So and I think we'd had this conversation early on with other kids. So then I decided to come with a book to class. But I'm kind of perusing on my own, But Mushene, I showed my friend. My friend passed to the other one. There's a lesson happening, by the way. So this book is running around the classroom as the teacher is teaching. Of course, she's going to notice something was happening. Mwenye alishikwa na kitabu alisema, it is her. Mimi na kitabu yangu nikapelekwa staff room kwa mama yangu. Nikaulizwa, imagine. Imagine, actually, that's why.
Mtoto wa mwalimu.
Mtoto wa mwalimu. Now my mom is embarrassed because she's like, how does this child have access to this book? It was like a whole lot of things. I remember I was shamed. I just remember the feeling of shame attached to that whole thing. And I think that was, again, it added to my trauma. It really did. It added up. My point is, there are books nowadays. The world is so filled with information in the form of books, breaking down from age 6 to 3, 3 to 7, 7, like that. So find a book that appropriate for your child and let them kind of go through it and go through it with them. I think it should help.
And it's never too early to talk about consent and boundaries. And some of the things that actually happen right now, and we ask, you know, did you not hear her when she said no? Did you not hear him when he said no? And it's like people do not understand the concept of consent. It's a very simple thing, okay? Learn to listen to people when they say no. And when it comes to boundary, always put up a boundary. If you're no longer comfortable doing something, say no. Don't just do something because the other person has started it. You don't want to make them feel bad. If it feels bad for you, say no. If you're uncomfortable, say no. And have this conversation when they are very young. Always say no. Don't be afraid of your child saying no. I have a child that says no to everything. He doesn't want to hug you, he'll say no, I don't want to. He doesn't want to shake your hand, I'll say no. He'll say no. And if the other adult is like, oh, what are you kusalimiana? I'm like,
it is what it is.
I refuse to force my child to hug other adults and to, you know, just be in physical contact with other adults when they feel like they do not want to. So always remind them they have the power, they have the right to say no. And when other people say no, they should be respectful of those boundaries.
Yeah, and especially considering how children, the problem is they don't have a proper filter. If you teach them that hugging someone is okay, they'll hug everyone, right? Even those weirdos, right? If you teach them that walking around with strangers and going to the house is okay, they will not know the difference between a good person and a bad person. And these things happen all the time because you've given a child such a blanket statement as a reference point, and they need more specifics. I think it's very important for you to be keen. If something is funny, just look into it, because children, hey, freak out every day. Anyway, another one is, unfortunately, there is the fact that digital content is there. And as Turi has mentioned very, very clearly, these days it's very important for you to like guard your child fully, because they go to school, like me, I went to the book. You have guarded your child in your house.
Kasomi has shown up with the book.
All positions. It's problematic. So again, these things do happen. You may have guarded your children, but digital content is there. Someone may send a picture that is inappropriate. They could be watching something clean on YouTube and then an ad just flashes by. You know, are you alone? Send a message to you get. They could be the internet is a wild place, right? So it's very important for you to also teach your children that if they come across information or footage or stuff like that, to criticize it, because we all know the industry that is the pornography industry unfortunately shows the worst depictions of what love is. And I actually thought that it's a today problem, but really think about it. When you used to watch these romantic movies as a child, so you'd see someone is being kissed and then the leg it lifts.
And we grew up thinking that, you know, every time you kissed, you swing your leg like this.
You know? If you grew up and all they did is touch your face like this. If you watched Korean drama, for example, K-drama, and all they do is they touch the face like this and then they just move. You think that is what is natural, which is, again, not true, right? For some people, yes. For some people, no. So, again, try and help your child understand that simply because you see it on the internet, you need to be a little bit more critical about it. Like, if it feels fictional, then question it. If it feels real, also question it. Give yourself that curiosity of what you're consuming. And if it feels confusing, come and show me. I will explain it to the best ability that I can, right? Yes.
And it's as simple as that. And also, children are curious beings. Just address their curiosity in a very nice way.
Yeah.
Just be nice to them. Always be kind. And if you do not know, because sometimes you won't know, they'll come to you and ask you something. You're like, oh, I have no idea what you're talking about. Admit it. Don't create stories. Because, you know, as an adult, you feel like I should be knowing everything. So if you don't know something like, oh, I didn't know about that, let us research together. Let us look it up together. You do the research together, but do it in a way usikuwe shocked hata wewe mkifungua pamoja type in vitu, you know.
Don't go telling children pegs are for clicking things.
Research.
You will have children.
Research in a wise way.
Yes.
I think it takes a lot of wisdom to raise
It really
kids.
does. Children are hard. They're curious. And you're also learning. There's so many new terminologies. There's so many new things that are happening. Even me, I feel hella vanilla. So imagine now raising a child
And
in your vanilla state.
They see through the nonsense. Because right now I've gotten to the stage where there's a tooth fairy. He removed another tooth last night and he was like, oh, I'll put it in under my mattress and the tooth fairy will come and give me 100 bob. And I was like, hold up, wait a minute. The last tooth, it was 50 shillings. Actually, we started at 5. He was okay with 5 shillings. He went to school, he was told, no, the tooth fairy gives out 50 bob. And then last night he was like, the tooth fairy will give me 100 bob. And I was like, wow. This economy, are there taxes? What's happening? So like children will have information from everywhere. Just because you think it's safe at home, it's not safe for the rest of the world. So be careful what's happening.
It's a sponge, it will absorb. That's the brain of a child.
That's all the time we have for you guys, unfortunately. But you know what? Have a lovely weekend. Perambulate. Even if you don't have money, stay at home, washa muziki, katika, kunywa maji. It's as simple as that. You know?